Good morning to all of you. Is the voice audible at the back? Okay, so I'll just take a minute. I think people online you can also see. Okay. Before I begin, I think people are watching this online because this is being live streamed on YouTube. This is KAVACH Plus. And in KAVACH Plus, this is a holistic program for your GS Foundation. And when I say GS Foundation, we go into various steps. Not only do we have the foundation classes, we also have the weekly tests for answer writing, which also includes Prelims plus Mains orientation. Both of them, which means for Prelims, we'll be making consolidated summaries. In fact, even for Mains, we'll be making consolidated summaries as we move along with the course. Additionally, this also equips you with tests, periodic tests, both for Prelims and Mains, right? And all of this, right, is covered under the big umbrella of KAVACH Plus. Those of you are new and maybe you're watching this class directly on YouTube, and if you want to know more details, we've already had a video regarding this. Okay, so you can connect with the team to know more or visit the offline center, etc. That can be done. Now, I will be moving on to the topic for discussion today. We are starting with an important segment, which is international relations. Right now, what in the, let's say, span of this class, you'll get a fair idea of what is international relations. Now, because this is your first class for IR, and I'm not assuming that you have a base in IR, okay? So I'll go in a manner in which at least the very first class, there are some important concepts you're able to understand, okay? That what, for example, is known as diplomacy, right? When I say diplomacy, what is national interest? What is the state? What are the key actors, right? And we will have a basic understanding today in the first class. And then with each subsequent class, the classes are divided in a thematic manner that when you are done with this module of IR in GS, you will have a very comprehensive understanding on how to analyze the world affairs. And more importantly, because see, the weight and the merit of the class is that it should help you answer questions, right? So when I'm looking at IR, we know that IR will be found in GS prelims. How many of you have seen the recent prelims paper? Some of you who have not yet seen it, nahi dekha? You will see in the last 4 or 5 years, the weightage of this section has increased a lot, international relations. Okay? And UPSC has asked you questions even on groups. This is just an example. Let's say BRICS, they'll ask you a question. They'll ask you a question on G20. They will ask you questions related to maybe some treaty or some outcome that happened, and something around that they will ask you a question. So the point is, IR is important for prelims to the extent that earlier, even if you ignored this section, that is still okay. But in the recent times, the weightage can go as high as 7 to 8, even 9 questions, sometimes even 10 questions, which you will see if you look at the paper. Okay. Second thing is, we also find this in mains. Which paper? GS2. So GS2 has 4 things, right? GS2 talks to us about polity, right? It will talk to us about social justice, governance, and IR, international relations. In IR, you are sure to get 4 questions. 2 questions will be 10 markers and 2 questions will be 15 markers, 1-5. So which means we are dealing with 50 marks out of 250 marks in mains. Right? And goes without saying, if you've seen any of the topper let's say transcripts or even mock interview, right? Even though you don't have to have an optional as PSIR, you can always be asked questions on this particular aspect, right? So IR not only helps you with prelims and mains, but is equally important part which you see in interview, right? In fact, when I say mains, I'm here only talking of GS2 aspect. I'm also reminded of the UPSC essay. Okay, now essay is of how many marks? 250, and you are supposed to write 2 topics. If you go back and look at the last 5 or 6 years questions, at least 2 or 3 times, the questions that have been asked have a bearing on IR. Okay, some time back, a question was related to technology as a silent factor in essay. They will even ask you non-alignment. In today's class, I'll be referring non-alignment, and in subsequent classes, you will exactly mean what and understand what is the meaning of non-alignment as well. Okay. Now, if you are, let's say, having an idea about these aspects, right? Prelims, interview, mains. This also tells you the weightage and importance of the section, right? See, if you just look at YouTube, okay, how many of you use YouTube? I think almost everybody, right? You will see the most popular podcasts are which podcasts? Geopolitics. Now, everybody today in today's terms is an expert in geopolitics. We also hope to be informed aspirants after your classes are done, right? So when I use the term geopolitics, how many of you have heard this term geopolitics? Okay? So I just want to know from you, what is the meaning of this term geopolitics? People who are seeing this on YouTube also, the floor is open for you. Right now, we are just opening up the topic. We're just seeing few terms that we have seen in news. And based on that, we'll be going ahead. Other people online, you can just mention. I hope you're able to clearly see the screen and hear to me. Right? Because I think if that is said, then I'll move on to the syllabus portion and other aspects. The very first term I'm starting off with, have you heard this term, geopolitics? Can we break this term down? What would be the meaning of it? See, geopolitics is made out of 2 words, geo and politics. What is the meaning of geo? Can this be geography? Right? Okay. Then what is the meaning of the term politics? And how do I bring both of these terms together? Achha, you're saying politics at the global level. Okay. Anything else? When you say, see, this term is very, very common. Okay. Anything you'll say, the geopolitics, and let's say US, you'll bring achha, China's geopolitics. So this term has become very common, I'm saying. So our idea is, what is the meaning of this term geopolitics? And your answers can be wrong, that is absolutely okay. But I just want to see whether you're able to just think about it. What can be the meaning of the term geopolitics? Try karega koi? Anybody? You have already tried? Anybody else? You want to try at the back? Politics around geography, so you're going through the meaning, okay. Which again makes me ask you the second question, what is politics? Is politics a bad word? Is it a neutral word? What is exactly politics? Sometimes we say stay away from office politics. Stay away from this politics. What is politics? Process through a system works, okay. Anything else? Now, see, 2 terms are mentioned here. Of course, geo can talk about the geographical aspect. Politics, for example, and you have to think of politics is about a power, a very one-line definition, okay. And when I'm saying power, please note, it is not just happening in the parliament. This will equally happen in household. In household, does everybody have the same power? No. You know that at least in the household, there will be one important person. It can be father, it can be mother, depends on the dynamics of the household. So politics is about power, which means what is ultimately power? So here, politics can mean anything which talks about allocation of resources is also politics. It is also related to decision making. So when I'm looking at this power, please note the power is not limited only to political offices. This extends everywhere. So when I'm looking at power, okay, so I'm writing H here means households. This can be there. It can be offices. Now, offices, of course, can be government. It can be corporate or private. Here also you will see some politics going on. Why? Because it is also about resource allocation. Who owns what? Who controls what? Even that is politics, right? Power, so households, offices, okay? And even at the national level, at the international level, you will see politics being operated. If I'm saying at the international level, politics is there. So don't you think that US is powerful? And because US is powerful, US is able to influence the world relations like that. The moment World War II ended, US started with something known as, and you don't have to remember it right now, Marshall Plan. That was related to the reconstruction of the countries. What is that? That is also politics. Why? It is able to influence decision making of certain countries. It will talk about resource allocation. So a very simple term, geopolitics, that is why it becomes important. So if I have at least no basic idea about geopolitics, I can extend this concept, okay? And this can also help me understand influence of great powers. Okay? A few moments from now, we will see terms like what is hard power, what is soft power, what is smart power. But you will also understand what is the influence of great powers, right? Because they want to exercise control on the world, not always directly, but sometimes even indirectly. Okay? That can be one aspect that we can talk about. Another thing that we go into, see, if I say geopolitics, okay? Now just think of any region in the world. Let's say my mind goes to West Asia, very conflictual region. And when I say geopolitics of West Asia, there's a geography part of it. Geographically speaking, West Asia is very important. Any reason why? Why is West Asia very important geographically? Have you seen West Asia on a map ever? If you've not seen it, over the course of these lectures, I will make sure that we have good understanding of the map as well. West Asia is prominent because of huge oil resources. It has mineral resources. A lot of people from India and around the world go to West Asia. They work and they send in remittances. So the region is important. And in this region, there are stakes of different players as well. Okay? So when I say the term geopolitics of any country, let's say, it can be West Asia. In the recent times, I can also say Arctic. In Arctic, what is happening? Melting of sea ice. And because of this also, the region becomes important. अब आप सोच के बताओ, you just think, why would Arctic become important for the countries? The region Arctic. Trade, okay. So let's say the region was covered with snow. Now that the snow is not there, now the ships can move. If the ships can move, trade can happen. Trade happens of what? Resources. So Arctic, like any other region, will also be rich in resources. Earlier, what was happening? Arctic was not being explored. Now the Arctic is being explored. Why? Because the sea ice is melting in the Arctic. So the moment any region of the world has resources, other countries now want to exploit the resources. If we think of 200 years back, the same also happened with Africa. Africa is a continent of huge resources and was heavily exploited by Western nations. We have seen same case if you think of be the case of India. Under the British rule for almost 200 years, the British came as traders, East India Company, okay? And throughout the process, it led to, there's a very prominent book you'll read in modern history, in Dada Bhai Naoroji's Poverty and Un-British Rule. And what did Britishers do? There's a concept known as drain of wealth. Okay, so those who have done modern history, they would know that. Those who have not done it, it will be done in your classes. When I'm saying drain of wealth, so resources from India were taken away and they were used for the betterment, development of British. All of that ultimately also boils down to the term geopolitics. Okay, till now in this class we've just seen where does the topic or subject IR help me. It helps me in prelims, it also helps me in mains in both GS2 as well as essay. It also would help you in interview, because in interview you will be asked a lot of questions, maybe the importance of a certain country, right? Give me any one neighbor that has been in news. There are many neighbors of India. Any one neighbor that is in news? You're saying China. Any reason why that is in news? The border conflicts. Okay. Any other country that anybody can tell me? Nepal. And why was Nepal in news? The protests that initially happened, the very prominent Gen Z protests. And we saw Gen Z protests not just in Nepal, okay, or maybe recently in India, but Gen Z protests have been a phenomena throughout. Okay, so when I'm looking at my neighborhood, neighbors also are becoming prominent because one reason or the other. Okay, so slowly and steadily we'll be going into all these aspects as we move along our course. Fine. Now, the very first thing, and this should be very clear from the very start. Okay, anybody who is now watching this, I would also encourage in the 1 odd minute you also see this and also write it accordingly. This is the syllabus for GS2 IR. So your mains preparation has to be done keeping this syllabus in mind. Okay, and here the UPSC is very categorically, very specifically mentioned what is there in the syllabus. Okay, the very first unit that you see is India and its neighborhood. Okay, this is the first topic. Second topic is relations between India and the neighboring countries. Right? Third, we say bilateral. Whenever I say the term bilateral, it means what? Bilateral is between two countries. So let's say India, Maldives, that becomes bilateral. India, US, that becomes bilateral. That is a bilateral aspect. We have regional groupings. We have global groupings. Okay. Now, can you give me any difference between regional and global grouping? Any difference? With one example, let's say, any regional grouping you are aware of? That is, let's say, limited only to a region. So very good. She was saying ASEAN. ASEAN is for the Southeast Asia. Okay. EU, again, a very region specific grouping. That's a good example. Okay. Any other example? Any example from South Asia? Can I say this body? SARC. In coming classes, you will see BIMSTEC, SARC. Okay. Somebody mentioned ASEAN. That is also a correct example. Okay. But there are also certain global groupings. Any global grouping you're aware of? You know, WHO can be one. Okay. We can also talk about, let's say, various organizations, right, which have major countries, for example, and agreements involving India or which are affecting India's interests. Okay. And this also, which means, so whatever has happened in the current, you'll also keep this in mind. For example, so let's say there's a recent WTO agreement. Let's say, for example, what is WTO? World Trade Organization. WHO that I wrote is World Health Organization. So let's say WTO recent agreement comes out. We have to also analyze how does it affect India's interest. Okay, so that also becomes an important aspect. So that is one. Next is effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest. Okay, in fact, in our lectures, we'll spend a considerable time understanding these two terms, developed as well as developing. And you will see in international politics, this fight also has been there. The fight of developed versus developing, right? And when I say this fight has been seen in different forums. Okay, now on the developed and developing part, I'll just take a minute just to explain this to you. In the coming classes, we will see terms like global north and global south. Now, please write a term as a homework. And prepare a 2 or 3 line note on it. Brandt line. Okay. There is an economist, Brandt, and this is, of course, this is not a real line. The Brandt line divides the world into global north and global south. Fine. And when I look at this term, the global north talks to us about the prosperous developed nations, and global south talks to us about the developing, the LDCs. LDCs means least developed countries. And this division is because of this line, Brandt line. Now, we can also argue that this division is maybe very biased in nature. How do you exactly quantify developed and developing? It may not be the most accurate way to classify the word. But the point is, this classification is there. So when you see that we see developed and developing countries, the main difference, you can say, let's say the difference is in their GDP, agreed. Difference maybe in their military power, military budgets, agreed. And difference in their technology, agreed. And because of this, their ability to execute projects is different. Developed countries will execute projects faster. Their ability to influence outcomes is also different. Both things are different. If I look at developed and developing, see, economically they are doing well. There's a difference. Militarily they will be different. Technology wise they will be different. So there's a difference in these two countries. Ultimately the difference in the capacity. It can be economic, it can be military, it can be technological. And because of that, you will see the difference in ability to execute projects. Okay. And the ability to influence outcomes. When I say outcomes, again think of US. The capacity of US compared to, let's say, a very small nation, let's say Bali, Borneo, Java, huge differences there. They're almost incomparable. Right? So in the world that we live in, you will see huge difference. And then how does a body like UN, how does, let's say, a Paris Agreement brings all these countries together? How can cooperation happen? Now, when I'm saying cooperation between these countries, the countries face, many countries I would say, they face common challenges. Right? And when I'm saying challenges, you would also have to understand new types of challenges are also coming in. Now, one of the challenges which the countries face, both developed and developing, will be climate change. Another challenge which you are seeing being faced, terrorism, nuclear weapons, biological warfare. If I go into again upcoming challenges, increasing non-state actors. Non-state actors, anything which is not state, this can be seen in piracy. Piracy is increasing. Okay. This can be seen even as, I can make an interconnection here. Many terrorist groups are ultimately non-state actors. Now they may also be influenced by the state, right? When we do Pakistan, etc., we'll see terms like state-sponsored non-state actors. Okay, so that is one. So if I'm looking at climate change, terrorism, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, etc., and of course obvious challenges like poverty, food, health, education, okay, which we will see are also properly mentioned in sustainable development goals. In fact, the very first SDG that we know of, what is the number one SDG? No poverty. What is second one? Related to food security. Third one is for health. Fourth is for education. Fifth is for gender. With due time, you'll also remember this. Okay. World is facing all these challenges. Okay. And on top of these challenges, many of you would know the recent wars that have started. Okay. When I say Russia, Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine war has almost touched 5 years. Okay, it's a prolonged conflict. And this is also a challenge which affects these countries, right? So if I'm looking at it, in these challenges, the biggest or one of the most, a challenge which will additionally be also there is, which can be Russia, Ukraine, which can be the crisis which is there, let's say the recent, right? And the issue is these wars also impact developed and developing nations. Okay, even that becomes a challenge, right? So if I look all these things into consideration, right, developing, or the challenges that are being faced, can you tell me if these challenges, they affect developed countries or developing countries more? Who are more impacted? Developing countries, because they have limited capacity. So that is something we have to keep in mind. It impacts both, but it will impact developing countries more, right? The moment there is a war right now, how many of you heard the term Strait of Hormuz? Sunata, what happened to Strait of Hormuz? It was weaponized, which means the trade and the ships were not being allowed. Last month in June, there was a particular MOU that was signed for normalization. Again, that MOU has gone for a toss. Again, the conflict has started. And all these things, Israel, Iran, Russia, Ukraine, in the subsequent classes, we will understand. But right now, we are basically understanding for ourselves that the challenges that are affecting the world, it is climate change, it is terrorism, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, non-state actors, okay, wars, the issue of sustainable development, and you will keep in mind developed and developing. Okay, I will tell you as we move along. For example, developed countries have resources, but they don't share the resources with developing. We will see in coming classes terms like CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. Okay, and the idea of CBDR, for example, and this is a term we often use with climate change. Now, what is the meaning of CBDR? The USA, let's say Europe, they have done all the development. They have emitted as much as they wanted to emit. Now they are at very good level of industrialization. Fine. Now they're asking other countries, Acha, now you adopt to new technologies. New technologies are more expensive. Okay. So developing countries cannot immediately adopt renewable technologies. What they would want, the developing countries are saying, you should assist us. You give us money, you give us technology. Why? Because you have been historical polluters. It is your responsibility to do so. And this is also where the word is divided. We know US under Trump, they've exited from all the major agreements. Okay, they've exited from WHO. They've exited from Paris Agreement. Okay, from various bodies. At a time when USA since so many years used to say everybody should follow rules-based order. In the coming classes, we will also see what is this rules-based order. Why does a country, for example, which has almost made major rules, is now defecting on those rules? And this will again tell you a very prominent quote that some of you are aware of. Okay, ये quote आपने, have you heard this quote? That there are no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies, there are only permanent interests. Okay, so in some time I'll also make you write down this quote and you will understand how the geopolitics and everything operates. Okay? Okay. Is the cooling working at the back or you have some challenge? Cooling, ventilation, all of that is fine? Okay? Okay. Okay. All right. So we were talking about the syllabus and we are at the syllabus. We just spoke about developed and developing countries. Another very important term in the syllabus is India's diaspora. Okay? When I say diaspora, what comes to your mind? People who are living abroad, right? How many of you recall Namaste Trump, Howdy Modi? Okay, some of the very prominent summits. In fact, we will see, for example, when I say Indian diaspora, we are one of the biggest recipient of remittances. Okay, and diaspora can also influence. It is the diaspora must not be looked only from money perspective, right? If you have substantial diaspora, let's say if India have a huge diaspora in US, can they help in lobbying? You know what is lobbying? This is the term I'm talking about. Lobbying is a term related to that, for example, how you influence decision making. Okay, so there are certain lobby groups. So the lobby groups will actually help in influencing the decision. They can act like a pressure group. For example, Israel has a very strong lobby. And you will see why. Because of that, US is many times very pro-Israel. They have a very substantial presence. Right? So the lobbying aspect is also there. So when we look at diaspora, this is also an important, yet a small topic that is there in the syllabus. Lastly, important international institutions, agencies, fora, they structure, they mandate. Almost every year, one question will come on agencies also. Now this question can be UN, it can be WHO, it can be WTO. There are various agencies. Some time back, a question was also asked on IMO, International Maritime Organization. Okay. So you will see a range of questions and topics coming from these areas. So the very first thing you should know is at least know your syllabus. What is there? Fine. In fact, in this syllabus, almost everything in IR is covered. Fine. Many times students make a mistake. For them, IR is generally they cover India and its neighbors very well, and they cover India and X. See, when I'm saying India and X, I'll tell you what I mean. For many students, IR ultimately becomes India, US, India, Canada, India, China. This is a very narrow way of looking at international relations. This is important. I'm not saying this is not important. You are requested or you are supposed to know all the major relations in comparison to India. But in the recent 2 or 3 years, if you look at mains questions, the questions are not that direct and that easy. Now, if you see this, for example, I'll tell you, for example, if the question is on India-Pak, is the question on India-Pak only? No. Why? Who supports Pakistan? China. Does India do trade with China? Are India and US very close? But US actually helped Pakistan get a IMF loan when you read about Operation Sindoor and its aftermath. Okay? And at a time when US and China themselves have conflict. The very best example of that is the trade and the tariff war. But even they also are collaborating. Despite tariff war, they have a lot of trade going on. Now, do you look at the complexity? So, India-China question is never on India-China. It is a range of issues. Same, a question of India and let's say Russia, any other country, will have a range of topics associated with it. So we will not make the mistake of looking at bilaterals only as bilaterals. We need to know the variables in the relationship. Similarly, how many of you have, You followed this year's Republic Day. When do we have Republic Day? 26 January, right? Who was the chief guest of this year's Republic Day? Any idea? So somebody said EU. So that is good, that is correct. And I actually wanted to ask you a term, mother of all deals. How many of you have heard this term? Maybe if you have not heard about it, that is okay. Okay. Because I'm not assuming you that you've followed all the current affairs before coming and starting the classes. I'm just asking you. There was a term that was made, mother of all deals. Acha, parallelly, maybe not here, at the last page or second last page, you will make a list of homework, right? I have a habit of giving you not only some basic facts to read about, additionally some questions almost after every class to practice on, okay? And somebody here I'll designate maybe after the class, you will be updating me on the homework that I'm giving, fine? The first term I've asked you to look for is, right? That is the first thing. Second, likho, read about the chief guests on the Republic Day 2026. In 5th or 6th class, I'll be telling you more about it. But right now, I want to tell you, India and EU have signed a very historic FTA. FTA means a free trade agreement, okay? Signed between India and EU. Now, when this is signed, somebody will say, Acha, India and EU want to have economic cooperation. That is correct. But it should not be limited to the analysis of India and EU. We will discuss in the class that this also has to do with USA, this also has to do with China. In a very fragmented, in a very chaotic world order, countries want to have multiple options. This, as we move along, is known as hedging, right? You know what the term hedging? How many of you have heard the saying, don't put all eggs in one basket? It is a bad thing. What happens? Everything may get lost or collapsed. So what do people do? They hedge. They diversify. Yes or no? When we do diversification, what is the benefit of it? At least if you lose one, if you lose two, there will be more options. And in the context of hedging, I'll tell you one of the best examples. Think of COVID-19. COVID-19, the world went through a huge supply shock. And the world realized over dependence on China is not a great thing. Okay? China also had its problems. So when I'm saying hedging, and you will understand the word hedging as we see some of these deals in more detail. So the point I'm trying to make is, as we will move along, we will not be limiting our analysis only to India X or very limited bilaterals. Bilaterals are important, but I will be telling you the range of variables that are there. For example, a simple relation in your neighborhood will get impacted by anything that is outside. We are living in an interconnected world order. A small thing happens, maybe far away from India's neighborhood. Can it impact India? It can surely impact India, right? And this is something that you'll also understand in times to come, okay? So the second homework I've just mentioned to you is Republic Day, and in that just write down the term mother of all deals. You'll see who had said this term, okay? Now, moving ahead, I think we are sorted with the syllabus. What is there? For prelims, I've told you the weightage of this. You will get good amount of questions. This was mains GS2, you'll have polity, social justice, governance. Right now we are doing IR. We've started with IR. Okay. Now, the basic idea is if there is any specific, see, prelims is all about MCQ. The idea today that you should take with you is if you want to be good at any stage, do more of it. And when I say do more of it, if you are solving MCQs, don't solve them very mechanically. Solve the MCQs, right? You will make mistakes, learn from the mistakes, and again do that. This is a vicious, right, proper cycle. And how many of you have heard that quote? Practice makes perfect. Okay? What is the problem in this quote? I'm saying practice makes perfect. And you would agree? The practice and perfect, there's a particular relation. The more I practice, the perfect I get. But I'm saying there's a problem in this quote. You saying as you're doing one thing is boring. Acha, anything else? But change it. After GS, do CSAT. Or maybe after CSAT, do current affairs. After current affairs, do optional. I'm saying practice makes perfect. What can be an issue in this? We never become perfect. Very good. That perfection is an elusive concept. Okay. Anything else? If I just want you to say there is a problem in this statement. No change in methodology. Your point is correct. See, when I say practice makes perfect, I am assuming that you know how to practice. Which means if you practice the wrong way, you will become perfect in the wrong method. Okay? So what the code should be slightly different. What should the code be to avoid ambiguity? When I'm saying practice, what kind of practice? Which means you should know the right practice makes perfection. Without that, see, let's say you are expert in doing the questions wrong. You do 10,000 questions. You will now become an even better expert in making questions wrong. So if I look at practice makes perfect, I should have a slight qualification in that. Okay. But again, I hope you get the idea that practice is important, indispensable. Same is this. I think some of you are having the first class today and some of you maybe have had maybe a couple of classes only. How many of you fear this? Have a fear of answer writing? That every topper says answer writing is important, but when I look at the answer, it looks like what? Fear. Okay. So in these classes also, I'll give you certain questions and I would want, even if you don't know how to write the entire answer, at least brainstorm the points. The class outcome is always a function of your effort. Right? Many times you say that this subject I don't know, this is boring and I have not read it. Please remember, interest, okay, and memory will go together. Right? For example, I'm a huge fan of, let's say, matches, watching cricket. And I can easily remember something that happened 15 years back, 10 years back. Because that event would have been inbuilt in my mind. Many of you who have started the preparation may have not followed current affairs. You may have not done maybe your geography, history as well in school because you did not know you'll have to do it again later on. The dream or the ambition strikes maybe sometimes later. So my point is, any subject, let's say we are starting with IR, I want you should have proper enthusiasm and commitment for that subject, not just during the classes, but throughout. And the more invested you are, which means there will be always a chance that let's say today, I've given you few 4 or 5 keywords you're not aware of. You write it separately. You maybe write it in 1 or 2 lines. You meet me after the class or before the class. You can also discuss. But your involvement will create interest and interest will lead to memory. Right? Memory is never an outcome. And again, for people who are enrolling in GS Foundation, generally a challenge comes, sir, how do we revise? Because the classes are going on. Some of you would have started with the optional or will start the optional. So the point we are trying to say is, see, classes everybody will do. What will set you apart? Are you able to take out those 30-40 minutes every day for the class that happened? Are you able to reflect on it? Reflection and revision is what will set you apart from the very outset. Otherwise, some people, what they do all the classes. But then after that, 10 classes later, they don't remember anything from the first 5 classes. Is that time very well spent? Not really. Because if you think you will do everything after foundation, you will revise, you will miss most of the context. Okay, and it may happen, see, let us be realistic, you may miss on revisions on certain days. You should then have a weekend, a particular slot. Acha, I will now revisit my notes. A simple act of revisiting will actually help you solidify your confidence a lot. Fine. So that is the aspect of mains. We will see this. Interview articulation. See, of course, through the span of my classes are going to be thought-provoking, maybe some, let's say, asking you questions on certain topics. And if you are following those topics also, so at least those range of issues you will have some clarity on. But see, this interview articulation speaking, some of you may be shy, some of you don't maybe speak as much, or some of you know the content in and out, but if I put the spotlight on you, now you think the voice is not coming. There is some issue in the esophagus. And the moment the spotlight is away, now you can easily speak. This happens. Okay. So this also requires practice. Okay. You can also have your own peer group. If you don't have a peer group, no issues. Maybe record your voice. But this again, I'm telling you, this is a long-term phenomena. Means you have time whenever you have to give the exam and you have to give interview, but don't ignore this aspect. What is the meaning of don't ignore it? If you read any topic well in depth, covering these two parts, I'm saying automatically you are prepared. Which is why don't segregate everything. I'll only do the facts because the prelims is coming. Only for mains, I'll do the mains type analysis. If you are doing an integrated approach, you will have an idea. For example, when we do India-Afghanistan, I will tell you that there is a particular issue that should India recognize Taliban, should India not recognize Taliban? And India recently has not recognized Taliban, but India is engaging with Taliban. Ab isme this year's UPSC interview, almost every third or fourth candidate was constantly asked questions on this part. Was India correct or was India not correct? And then you have to defend your position. And sometimes you have to play devil's advocate. You know what is devil's advocate? For example, I am saying, I agree with your point. Now, if I become devil's advocate, I just mean I will counter your point now. Okay? So, which means, see, in debate, what is there for? Against. Okay? So, even that will be done. So, at least in my classes, at least for 2 or 3 topics, okay? I will not announce the topics beforehand, but we will have a small basic session, okay? A very mini sessions where I will ask you to articulate your thoughts. And don't worry, it will be impromptu, right? It will be very sudden, but it will help you. Because if I put you sometimes in a slight spot of bother, your mind then acts very fast, okay? And this we will also learn as we move along. So I think that is the point, okay? Now, this is the most asked question. That's for IR. What should I be referring? Okay. What is that one big golden book? Please tell me so that I become an expert in IR. What is that one monthly compilation? And what is that one book? Okay. Everybody, even after this class ends, I'll have most of the messages on this front only. Now, because you are reading this, see, I'll tell you what is to be done. See, reference sources. Number 1, because you will be following the classes, will be your class notes. But again, remember, at whatever point you give the exam, okay, already a huge undercurrent of current affairs would have passed through. The classes will be in a manner that, let's say I'm teaching right now, I'll be covering the current affairs till, let's say, the end of June or perhaps the mid of July. Fine. So the class notes will be helping you understand the structural foundations. That will always remain constant. Plus, it will have relevant current affairs. Okay, but beyond that, okay, for the students who are already a part of foundation, you will have your current affairs classes also going on. After you are done with this, now these classes will make a lot of sense to you. Okay. Third thing, if you are, even because this is going on YouTube as well, there'll be some students who have not done any of this. Okay. What I can suggest to you, okay, if you're able to find notes, and this is specifically for people who are not following the foundation, okay. I'm writing here specifically not FC, for example. Notes, if you're able to find, okay. But more than that, you have to have updations. Now, organic way to do is reading newspaper. But here also I know some challenges will come. You're a working candidate, you have more issues, etc. And when I say newspaper, it can be any. It can be Indian Express, it can be not both. You can refer both when you're giving the interview, but not at prelims or main stage. It can be a current affairs magazine. If you're not able to follow newspapers, now this you can do either weekly, if you have time, or even monthly, that would also suffice. Okay. This can help you. Now, additionally, some of you also asks for some videos and some points. So here I can say, I think some of you, whatever YouTube channel or news media outlet, some of you sometimes follow, you've heard of Palki Sharma, Vantage, okay. So there are others, so Cut the Clutter is there, right? Even in DD News, sometimes you have Sriram Cholia. Any person, if you are able to find and understand, again, please remember, this is optional. It is not that this is mandatory, but sometimes you ask for a resource. Is this a good resource to follow? So again, I'm telling you, for example, in DD or let's say RSTV, of course, the name has now changed. Here you will find some interviews and podcasts of Sriram Cholia. These are good. Okay, other than this, any, I'm saying any, okay? And it is not, maybe that you have a time, then you can watch a couple of episodes, that can also help. So the newspaper can help, the magazines can help, that is what you will find. Over and above this, you have to go through PYQs. Now, after the classes, I would recommend you that you go for PYQs so that you get an idea. The students of the foundation, you will additionally also have the Vajra classes of mains that will again be a revision just before your exam also. Okay, so we are not meeting here only for the foundation classes. For prelims also there are specific classes for revision of IR, and for mains there is also specific classes for revision of IR. Okay, in case somebody is not aware, so in Vajra also we do the same thing, but that is in entire one class I cover the whole update and everything revision of IR. But to make the best use of that, you have to go through the foundation. If you've done the foundation, then that class is like a cakewalk for you. Okay, so the people who are in the foundation, there are multiple levels of interventions that we will go through. It is the foundation level. Again, for prelims, you'll have prelims crash courses, etc. वहाँ पे revision होगा. For mains also, you will again have revision of those parts in that particular format. Okay, but again, if somebody is following this directly, these are some sources which I would say that you can go through. That is there. Fine. Now we are going to begin our discussion. Okay, see, what is going to be our approach is this. We'll focus on the basics. In the basics, there is going to be static part. In many questions and many topics, I'll go through its PYQ and I'll give you a range to help you understand how to prepare the topic. Okay. Additionally, wherever current affairs references I'm giving you, today only I mentioned India EU FTA, it's a part of current affairs. Okay. The Israel-Iran ongoing war and its dynamics, again a part of current affairs. Okay. That is there. In all of this, I will tell you the last three remaining points are very important. Okay. This is what is the most mentioned aspect. Everybody will say to you, read current affairs, okay, and revise. Revision is something that you should do, okay, and it will be a task, tough task for you to take out time. Somebody do it at the last thing of the day. Somebody start their day with revision. It is totally your call. Okay. This part you will get better the more you revise. Interlinkages. You've heard toppers saying, do the interlinkages in the answer. You cannot do interlinkages from the very first class. But over a period of time, when you are sure about the concepts, then the interlinkages will get better. And lastly, because you are going to get 50 marks directly, and even other topics are related, answer writing is going to be an important aspect. Fine. But again, remember, answer writing cannot directly start if you are not clear about any topic. Okay. Sometimes you are very enthusiastic. No, the class has started, now give me 5 answers. But if you don't have the content, you will get demotivated. So for me, answer writing makes sense after I'm done with certain topics. And do not worry, for the topics that I'll do with you, I will give easy questions also and challenging questions also, both. Right? You should have an exposure of both. Easy questions will give you confidence that whatever you've read, you're able to articulate. Challenging questions will again make you think, how should you have revised that topic? Because the question will be from something that you have done. But again, if you're not able to answer it, our answer is that how should we cover those areas so that we're able to write and answer that. Is that clear? Fine. Okay. Okay, please write your first heading, geopolitics in 21st century. And till now, again, for some parts, I would encourage that you take some running notes. And for the other parts, right, I will be also giving some dictation and I'll have a mix of both. Okay. If you look carefully at this image, you see a chess board. Okay. And you see countries. What is chess prominent for? Chess talks about moves. 1 move, 2 moves. It can be short term, it can be medium term, it can be long term, right? So when I'm saying geopolitics in the 21st century, I'm talking about the different types of undercurrents that are happening in the world. What is the world going through? Okay. Have you written this heading, geopolitics in 21st century? Now, forget this heading. Okay. Now I will be asking you, in the last 1 year, whatever you have read in IR, even if you have not read, you will say, sir, I don't know anything much. Okay. But anything that has stood out in your mind Acha, I had heard about this point, or this thing was in news. Okay, for people on watching this again on YouTube, my question to you is anything in the last 1 year that you are aware of, and I'll tell you then why this heading makes sense. Okay, I will start from the back. Everybody will get a chance. Anything in 1 year, only one topic you have to tell. Any term that you've read of, any current update that you've read of, सोच के बताओ. And equally valid for the people watching this online. So war between. So ठीक है, one, of course it was not a war. There was a kind of escalation. Escalation never led to a war. But I understand your point. You said after Pahalgam attack, India's retaliation in terms of Operation Sindoor is something that is there in your mind. Okay, good. Next. Trade agreements have been in news. Next. Okay, okay. Next. Maritime security. No, you have to force yourself. Otherwise, I'll again come back to you. Think of anything. It is easy for the people who are starting. It will be difficult for your friends at the front. They will say, sir, already my point has been spoken about. Okay. Hidayat Center, US Iran tensions, very good. Again, for people online, if your friend or somebody has already mentioned that point, you are forced to think of something else. Okay. You want to say anything? You can use even my examples. Chalo. Trade of Hormuz. Tariffs. Terrorism, counter-terrorism. Okay. Now, anything comes to your mind? If not, I'll give you, chalo, you have around 40 seconds. Okay. Border conflicts. POK was in news. Okay. Venezuela president, again, Maduro, taken away by US. Okay. Israel-Iran war. Now, you've already got some help. हाँ. Nuclear weapons. ठीक है. कुछ भी अब बताओ. हाँ. You. आपकी turn है. Chad. You're thinking of Africa. Okay. The Sahel region. US resumption of nuclear testing. Very good. Okay. Saurabh, tariff war, excellent. Other people online, what is the issue? Chalo, very good issue. Somebody is mentioning Pax Silica. Okay. Write this also as your homework. I'll come to it when I discuss, but again, these are good terms. I'm writing it. And you'll make a separate copy, etc. of your homework. By the end of the class, you'll have a substantial good points, things to know of. Okay, anybody else online? I think we have had a very good discussion with the people who are in the class. So that are good points you've shared. Okay, now, in the heading geopolitics, you've given me good range of points. Now, what I want to tell you, and after this point, I will now go into what is IR, what is foreign policy, and what is diplomacy. And from that, I begin what is state, what is non-state actors, what is power in the truest sense. Okay. So from this heading, we will go into different topics. See. Right now, we are focusing on events. But almost 20-30 minutes later, you will understand that the events are not that important. But foundational concepts are even more important. Something happened. For students of IR, okay, something happened, fine. But we should be able to know why that happened. Who that event affects. What is going to be the impact of it. Okay. And how do we manage that? Right now, we are only writing the events. That's it. Okay. Now, when I'm saying geopolitics of 21st century, okay, I'll be writing points here. You will write with me. Okay. These points which we're doing in the first class will make sense to you in every subsequent class because those points will be dealt in more detail. Okay. Geopolitics of 21st century. The very first point you will write. First point is this. We are starting with US. I am saying a reluctant US and a declining US influence. Why this is an important event of 21st century? Earlier, what used to happen in 20th century, US was very active in the world order. US used to show a lot of influence. Now, what are we seeing? US is taking a step back. And how do I say that? So, first is this point. We will say we see something known as America First policy. In the bracket, I've written MAGA. What is MAGA? Making America great again. US has taken a step back. Okay, what we see, this is one example to prove it. Second, another event we will say 9/11. You know 9/11? What happened in 9/11? 9/11 happened in 2001. There was a huge terror attack on the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. And that event was also seen as the decline of US hegemony. Earlier, it was that US is infallible, nobody can touch US. But now, non-state actors can also impact US, and also a sign of possible declining influence. So 9/11 terror attacks. Declining US influence can also be seen in its Afghanistan withdrawal. Right now, I'm giving you only a few examples. As we move ahead, we will see more examples. The very first important undercurrent in 21st century happens to be reluctant US and declining US influence. Second undercurrent is US China. US China dynamics. Now here I've written a term, Thucydides trap. This term became very prominent in May 2026. Okay, this term was uttered by Xi Jinping. Who is Xi Jinping? Right, the Chinese head. And he used this term in the context of Taiwan. Okay, now write a line somewhere. Because Taiwan holds 90%, 90% resources related to advanced semiconductors. 90% resources advanced semiconductors. Okay, and abhi bas itna, that's it. Okay, as we move along, I'll tell you what is the issue with Taiwan and China. See, right now the US-China dynamics, and we see a term Thucydides trap. Okay, for some, I think most of you will not have heard this term. Okay, I'll explain this term to you. The Thucydides trap is known as, so there was some time back a war, many years back, between Athens, okay, and Sparta, right? Thucydides trap talks to us about two powers. Okay, so let's say there is an established power, and there is a emerging power. Sometimes we use a term revisionist power. Why? this power wants to overtake this power, right? The power that is established. Now, in this case, we're talking of established power is US, rising power is. Now, according to Thucydides trap, the challenge is if there is established power and there's a revisionist power, this can lead to a war, right? And this has been seen many times, right? This study has been done by scholars like Graham Allison, and who spoke about that in 12 out of 16 times, if such a contest happens, if there's established power and there's a rising revisionist power, it will lead to a war. So actually Xi Jinping warned of Thucydides trap while referring, and he said that US intervention in Taiwan can possibly lead to a Thucydides trap. So what does Thucydides trap tell me? The great power relations and great power dynamics. US as established power, and US is seeing China as a rising power, right? And because of this insecurity, potentially there can be a conflict which can lead to a war. If the war happens, we know this is going to be very destabilizing for the countries, right? I hope that makes sense. So what is the idea of Thucydides trap? Only two keywords you'll remember. Established power is there. There's a revisionist power. The rising emerging power, and this can potentially lead to a conflict leading to a war, okay, if the situation is not managed well, okay. So here we are seeing the US-China dynamics. The US-China dynamics is a very important feature of the 21st century. That now you don't see in the 20th century which two countries were prominent. In the 20th century you had US and USSR. The world was under a Cold War, okay, and Cold War also I'll explain it to you when I discuss NAM with you. Right now, the 21st century, US-China dynamics are going on. Okay, that is one. Third phenomena is the rise of middle powers. Now, these can be many countries, right? You can have Japan, you can have India, you can have Brazil, Germany, etc., etc. Many new countries are coming together. And again, remember, this is very different from the existing state of affairs. Earlier, in the 20th century, there was only the talk of two countries, right? US and USSR. They were the two major poles. But in 21st century, other countries are also increasing. India has become very prominent, okay? Japan, other countries are also increasing their weight. So this is also seen in the current 21st century, equally true, okay? Fourth, geopolitics. I'm seeing globalization in 1991. India adopted LPG reforms. What is LPG? Liberalization, privatization, and globalization, right? But in the recent times, globalization is not happening in the manner you want it to be. Countries are imposing tariffs, countries are imposing costs, and the trade has become very uncertain. To that, we are now seeing instead of globalization. What is the meaning of globalization? The globalization, can it mean compression of time and space? Can it mean a borderless world and a borderless or a global village? Globalization mein hota kya? What happens in globalization? The ideas, the capital, the people, all of that are free to move anywhere. Globalization. Globalization leads to more and more market trade that happens. In the recent times, I am seeing the opposite. I am seeing slowbalization. Means globalization has become slower. And we see even talks of deglobalization. Okay. How do I say so? The question is, we are seeing increasing tariffs, Think of H-1B visa fee, US. And think of another important term, xenophobia. What is the meaning of xenophobia? What is phobia? Phobia is fear. Okay. And when I say xeno means outside. Okay. Anybody from the outside, if I have a fear of it, that is xenophobia. And this xenophobia is rising in Europe also. And you will see in many countries now the people are saying outsiders go back. The native people should have the jobs. And it is not just the people who are saying it, some section of the people. It is also the parties that are saying it. And this tells us there is a global rise of far right parties. There's a global rise of far right parties. They also say the same thing. They are not very happy with globalization and they have the challenges with globalization. Right? So, globalization has led to globalization also and talks of deglobalization. Why? You are seeing increase of tariffs. You are seeing even in US hike in the H1 visa fee. If the fee is hiked, lesser people will go, right? Similarly, if there's a rise of xenophobia, if you see racial attacks, if you see other issues, people will not go for jobs. It will lead to decline of globalization. This is also one of the trends in the 21st century. Another trend in 21st century, apart from these trends, of course, is proxy warfare. You know proxy? In college, how many of you have heard this term proxy? And how many of you actually implemented that? Okay, so proxy is you are giving attendance on somebody else's behalf. What is proxy warfare? You are fighting on somebody else's behalf. Can you give me any one example of proxy warfare in the current 21st century? Israel, Iran, right? But who is the proxy here? Proxy means somebody else is fighting your war. Or but Israel, let's say, directly attacking, then Israel is not a proxy. So I'll tell you, one of the very prominent example that we can give here is the case of the 3H here means Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis. Where do Hamas operate? In our class on West Asia, we will also do the mapping of West Asia so that you know points like what is Rafah crossing, right? Where is the issue, disputed issue of Palestine? Okay. What is Hezbollah? Where does it operate? Lebanon. Houthis, where do they operate? Yemen. Okay. All these three are supported by which country? Correct. The 3H is supported, for example, by Iran. If proxy warfare is going on, Iran or maybe some country can deny. They can deny we are not doing the war. And somebody else is fighting on their behalf. So it was said recently that Iran will sign the MOU for peace, but Iran may indirectly fund these and the war can go on without Iran being responsible for it. The issue with proxy warfare is who will you point the blame on? Difficult to attribute. That is one issue. Next, the wars. Okay. And when I say wars, ब्रैकेट में आप लिखना UN at 80. UN was established in 1945, right? How many years? Of course, now it is going to be the 81st year. Why was UN established? To prevent wars. But is that happening in the real? No. So this is also a crisis that UN faces. That is it able to stop the war? Is it not able to stop the war? This is a challenge. And when I'm saying wars, the very prominent one which we saw was Russia Ukraine conflict. How is this war related to the heading geopolitics in 21st century? Now, please understand, and we will see Russia Ukraine in slightly more detail in the class. Right now, I'm giving you an overview. See, if Russia and Ukraine are having a conflict, even if you don't know the conflict, can you make a guess why would they be fighting? Some resource issue. Okay, okay. Again, I'm not asking you that you know the reason why this is happening. If you know it, excellent. But again, I'm asking you overall in general. Let's say two countries are fighting. What could be possibly the reason why they fight? Border disputes. Okay, good. Any other thing? Ukraine wanted to join NATO. Let's make them join NATO. Why fight? Okay. Anybody else? Somebody mentioned NATO. Right? My question is not to you, but somebody else. If I want to join any grouping, why I am getting attacked? I should be open to join any grouping. Any other reason that you think of? The first class is again to open your mind. Okay? So slowly and steadily, after in every class, all these points will get in some sense repeated. So by the end of the class, you will have a lot of clarity. Right now, we are seeing the word in a snapshot. Fine? Now, when I'm writing the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I need to know US and USSR were engaged in a Cold War. Can anybody in the class tell me what was the temperature of Cold War? What was the temperature of Cold War? I'm saying it is cold. I'll give you three options: -14, -26, and -41. -26. Anybody else? आप बताओगे? I'm saying what was the temperature of Cold War? I'm saying it is Cold War, right? What was the temperature? 40? Pakka? How do we know it is 40? Acha. Anybody else? Cold War there is nothing to do with temperature. See? When I'm saying the war is cold, it is just that it is not hot enough to start a war. The Cold War में cold is a misnomenclature. अब आप याद रखोगे not 26 degrees, not 40 degrees. Cold War has nothing to do with temperature. The reason is Cold War में it is cold enough to not have an actual confrontation. Cold War में there was no war that happened. Cold War is an ideological conflict. The conditions were very close to a war. There was a state of heightened tensions, but not a war. Okay? So this is a ideological conflict. What is the meaning of ideological conflict? Ideologies are fighting. Which ideologies are fighting? US is standing for which ideology? You're saying capitalism, I will say the economic philosophy of liberalism is capitalism. What was USSR fighting for? Which ideology? Communism or socialism? And here also there will be some people who are not aware about these ideologies. Do not worry. Okay. One line definition I'll give you just in a moment. See, there is this Cold War going on. Now, what is the temperature of Cold War? No such temperature. It is just a term that is used, that it is not hot enough. And hot here means what? In the military sense, hot here means that ultimately the wars and fight will happen. So Cold War is a state of nervous anxiety. It is a state of heightened anxiety where the conditions were bad, but not bad enough that a war actually takes place. Okay? Now, this is the first thing. Second thing that you should know, that USSR got disintegrated, okay, from 1989 to 1991. Disintegration happened. And when the disintegration happened, what is the meaning of disintegration? The breaking down. The Soviet Union ultimately also became, many of these blocks, Eastern Bloc, they got independence. And you'll be surprised to know many of these countries, which were erstwhile Soviet Union, they adopted liberal capitalism. They took new ideology. And USSR ultimately became what? Russia. And other independent colonies, EITs, economies in transition. Okay? Now, if a country has just recently gotten disintegrated, it will have its own challenges, development challenges, etc. Fine? Now, still, US and Russia will be having a contested relationship. But Russia is no more USSR. Okay? Now, this contest is going to happen. But in this contest, this is a clear winner. Clear winner, why? And you will see in some time, I'll use terms like hard power. Hard power means military power. Hard power means economic power. US is very dominant. Okay? Russia is weaker. Now this is where something your friend also pointed out. Ab kya hoga? See, countries have gotten independent. There is a grouping known as NATO. And NATO will start its eastward expansion. So NATO will bring more countries into its membership on the east. This is very close to Russia. And over a period of time, this will make Russia more nervous. Because if the countries are becoming member of NATO, problem kya hai NATO ke saath? NATO is it is allies which are militarily combined. And in NATO, the principle is attack on one NATO country means attack on all NATO countries. And they use something known as an Article 5. Article 5 talks about collective defense. If one country is attacked, all the other countries will come together and they will attack the adversary. Okay? So, now what happens here, and there are multiple theories on why Russia attacked Ukraine. One of the reasons, and you need to know only two reasons for now. One reason is NATO's eastward expansion. Second reason that is given is, I should say, Russia or Putin's imperialism. Access to warm water ports. Okay, this is also one of the reasons which could have led to the conflict. Okay, we see Russian imperialism, and from the Russian side, the answer is also that the people in Ukraine are very closely culturally with the people of Russia. So they are just saying that we are bringing our our people back. So in that sense, if you are looking at the conflict, okay, now the moment a conflict happens, it's very easy to start a war, but then the consequences of war are very difficult to deal with. Okay, the moment this war started, and I'm just making a simple mind map, you can just make along with me. This will also help you just have a snapshot of what is happening in the global affairs. Immediate consequence happened on these front. Food, fuel, fertilizer. There will be a shortage, direct impact. If there's a war that happens, food security is impacted, fuel availability is impacted, fertilizers are impacted. Second, this will be a humanitarian crisis. A lot of lives will be lost on both sides. This war is will have economic consequences. Why? Increased military spendings, which means lesser resources available for development. Think of the consequences, let's say, on EU. EU will now spend more on its security. Think of India. 60 to 70% of Indian defense import comes from which country? Russia, right? So whether Indian imports will be impacted? Because Russia is fighting its war, it will prioritize its war. So Indian defense import and as well as India's maintenance of old equipments will be impacted. In the consequences, I just need to think of dimensions, okay? Humanitarian, economic, on EU as a bloc, on India overall. What is going to be the impact of it? So even this is there, right? What is going to be? Now, UPSC in your mains, if you see the paper, they had even asked you what is Indian foreign policy stance on Russia-Ukraine conflict. India did not publicly criticize Russia. Okay? Why that could be? India said that we are concerned about the loss of lives on both sides. But India did not criticize or condemn Russian actions. And many West countries said India should condemn Russia. Why did India not condemn Russia? And this is also, you will understand as in coming times about foreign policy. Good point. We had good, very deep relations with Russia. Okay. And you will understand that in foreign policy, we use terms like strategic autonomy. You know what is autonomy? Autonomy is being able to decide for yourself. Nobody else is saying what you should do, what you should not do. Right? And we will see in later classes what is the Indian response to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And why that response is criticized and why India justifies that response. Both things we will have a look at. But right now I've just told you overall that what is the basic idea about the conflict. Possibly why this would have happened. NATO's expansion, etc. What are the overall consequences? And remember, this is not a very recent topic. This is almost a 4 to 5 year old continuous topic, constant going on back and forth. Okay. Now, if this aspect is clear to you, that for example, the context is going on, the reasons for the war that is going on, again, let me go back and we were continuing about geopolitics of 21st century. One of the wars is this. Another thing that has broadly contested the whole region is the issue of Russia, Israel, Iran, sorry, US, this can be also one of them. So you have written, I think, till now 6 points in the geopolitics of 21st century. What are the issues the world is facing? Now, in addition to that, we will write our 7th point. There is a prominent rise of global south in the 21st century. And when I say global south, we see, of course, already we've seen the rise of India. But apart from India, we see, for example, African Union, Brazil, also rising. Okay, in fact, it is said that 21st century will be the century of Africa. Okay, so Latin America, Africa, they are also increasing in their weight. In 1950s, 60s, 70s, these countries did not have much power. But as development has happened, as globalization has happened, the global south is rising. Ab batao, if global south is rising, will it demand more? will obviously demand more, and it will start from UN, United Nations Security Council. How many of you are aware of UNSC? Right, you have heard of UNSC. Of course, UN is a proper topic in our classes. We will see that UNSC has 5 permanent members. How many members? 5. Okay. How many of these members are from Africa? The answer is 0. There is none member from Africa. But look at the size of Africa and look at the population of Africa. Don't you think this is injustice? Right? And you will see Europe being overrepresented. Right? World's largest democracy, which is that? India. How is India represented in UNSC? India is not there as a permanent member. India has been non-permanent member. So when you look at it, when the rise happens of global power, they will also simply say we want more and more power in terms of institutions also, and not just UN. Think of IMF, think of World Bank. In other areas also they will want to say. So even this is happening as a demand. 8th, now the world is realizing more about maritime security. For that, of course, India realized it through a very harsh lesson. The 26/11 attacks that we had to face. But in addition to it, maritime security also becomes important. If you look at Indo-Pacific, okay, and again Indo-Pacific is one area. Please remember, Indo-Pacific. What is Indo-Pacific? Indian Ocean, Pacific Oceans have become important, right? Anybody who has written Indo-Pacific till now? You've अभी लिखा आपने? लिखो इसके नीचे. देखो, Alfred T. Mahan, M-A-H-A-N, Alfred T. Mahan. Put a dash and write, those who rule the oceans, those who rule the oceans rule the world. Those who rule the oceans rule the world. In fact, this theory also explains to you the dominance of Britain. Britain had a very superior navy, and because of the very superior navy, Britain was able to have a very considerable influence. All right. So if I'm looking at these points, right, maritime security is very important. India, 26/11. 9/11 happened in 2001. 26/11 happened in 2008. Okay. So maritime security is getting more and more relevance. Countries are spending more on navy. Countries are having more and more naval exercises. Okay. So even that is there, right? So right now we have seen some of the important elements that are happening. Of course, I can give you even 5 more points. But for now, this tells you what is the world facing at large. We have economic issues in terms of tariffs, globalization. The world greater powers are contesting. Okay. Another issue is, for example, the rise of middle powers, the rise of global south, but they are not getting enough policy space in the institutions. Okay. Which is why, write the last point, chalo likho. The last point I have written is there's a demand for reformed multilateralism. There's a demand for reformed multilateralism. Okay. Now let us see the term reformed multilateralism. Okay. What is the meaning of multilateralism? You would not know it, likho, put a dash, likho. And I'll also tell you what is the meaning of reformed in that case. Two things are there, right? The term that we are seeing is and this is a term constantly. When we do the bodies, I'll tell this term to you again and again. Okay, let me first explain this term to you, then we'll be writing it. Now, see. Some of the bodies that you are aware of. Okay. For these bodies, we say these bodies have too little cash, too much politics. This phrase is also UPSC PYQ. And this they had asked you in terms of UNESCO. And in the question UPSC had asked you that UNESCO is criticized for having an anti-Israel bias. Okay. The bodies which you have, they have a financial issue. They have limited money. And this money is dependent on too little cash. Why? They are having donor dependence. USA, if it is in a good mood, will give us money. If it is not in a good mood, they will arm twist. Okay. When I'm saying there's too much politics, politics of developed versus developing. All these institutions that you hear about, all these institutions are West dominated. They're dominated by the West. Okay. When I'm saying dominated by the West, they will have more voting structure, more rights. So the developing countries will always feel sidelined. This is the challenge that happens. So when I'm saying reformed multilateralism, again, please remember, UN was created in 1945, and even right now, UN reflects the 1945 word order. The UN is not updated at all. So when we make a claim of reformed multilateralism, what is our idea? Our idea is to make these institutions democratized. What is the meaning of democratization? You give them relevant voice, right? You make them financially independent, empowered, and you reduce the politics as much as possible, right? So if the claim, and this demand every year, India through NAM, through SCO, through BRICS, through G20, India makes this demand every year. Not just India, other developing countries. And we say, what do we want? We want reformed multilateralism. Is that clear? So the term that you are seeing now is a term known as reformed multilateralism. First, I hope you get the essence of it. Multilateralism means what is multilateral? More than 2 or 3 countries will be there. What is bilateral? 2. Unilateral? 1. Unilateral 1, bilateral 2. Multilateral means any organization, any place where you have multiple countries. If you have multiple countries, etc., do you want rules-based order or don't you want rules-based order? If you have multiple countries, you want as simple as that rules-based order. Otherwise, cooperation kaise hoga? Cooperation will take a back seat, right? So if I want a rules-based cooperation, the countries should go for, the groups should have rules. Now, just let's take it one by one. UN is there, but wars are also going on. UN is not able to do much. IMF and World Bank. In IMF, you will be surprised to know the Western nations have 9 times the voting share of developing countries. 9 times difference is there. Huge. IMF and World Bank are heavily West dominated and West biased. WTO is there, but the world is facing tariffs. So what is the use of WTO? WTO was created to have what? A fair trade. If the world is facing a tariff crisis right now, don't you think WTO is also in crisis? And when you'll read WTO, when we do this in slightly more detail, I'll tell you, WTO right now is facing what? Paralysis. It does not have a functioning dispute settlement board. And that is also because of US actions. The US has been very reluctant to make WTO functional. So WTO is in crisis. So countries are saying at least make WTO functional or at least go for cooperation. You have WHO now. We had COVID-19, okay? And if you recall, and not that you're preparing for UPSC then, but if you recall the conversation of those times, it was initially said, let's make this or name it Wuhan virus. Where is Wuhan? It is in China. Did China happily accept or did it reject the claim? Reject, because the moment the name of the virus becomes Wuhan virus, it will bring you a lot of disrepute, okay? And the people who are there in WHO, they were also pro-China. So finally this name nomenclature was not done. What does this tell you? There is some politics going on. Some countries are protected, okay? Now, you'll be surprised to know, at least some of you, this you will read in Science and Tech also, but I'm just telling you a name. This is an enzyme in a drug-resistant bacteria. Just see the name. What is the name? New Delhi. So some things are named country-wise also, and NDM strains are found, okay, and it is known as this developing countries virus. You know what is a multi-drug resistant bacteria? This you will read later on. The basic idea is, let's say you take a basic medicine. Normally the medicine should help you, but now the bacteria has gotten resistant to that. You now need more doses of the same medicine, or you need a higher or a better drug. Okay, same thing, for example, you know, mosquitoes and morphine, the famous love affair that was there. What is happening right now? That morphine is doing nothing. Now mosquito is sitting on top of it and you don't have anything. So now you will either go for more morphines or some new variant. Okay. So just giving you an example, the NDM11 is named on New Delhi, but Wuhan virus was projected and of course debated. That is something I was telling you. UNESCO also faces this issue. Okay. US has even criticized UNESCO as a anti-Israel body. This is US perception. So if I look at the bodies, I am seeing too little cash and too much politics. Politics of developed and developing countries, which is also a phenomena we are seeing in the current times. Is that clear? Okay. So for reformed multilateralism, just write in one line what you want to, let's say, define this as. This is a proper theme I'll discuss again, but right now just for the sake of it. Reformed multilateralism, put a dash. It is an approach for reformed multilateralism, right? It is an approach to global governance. It is an approach to global governance that calls for structural updates. It is an approach to global governance that calls for structural updates to post-Cold War, right? That calls for structural updates to post-World War II. Don't write Cold War, World War II. Post-World War II institutions to reflect the contemporary realities. Post-World War II institutions to reflect the contemporary realities. What is the basic idea? That you have to reform these institutions because they are not reflecting the current realities. Is that clear? Okay. So we have seen overall 9 points in geopolitics of 21st century, right? First point, now please go through your notes quickly. Revise this once. We started with the reluctant US, declining US influence. Second one was the US-China dynamics. We saw term Thucydides trap, the rise of middle powers, globalization becoming slowbalization and deglobalization, proxy warfare, wars, when we've seen 2 examples of it. The rise of global south, maritime security becoming prominent, and the last is demand for reformed multilateralism. Okay, these are the few points that we've had a look at under the geopolitics of 21st century. Sorry, technology as a separate dimension we'll take. Again, I've told you in the geopolitics we can have at least 10 more points. Okay, so as we move along, technology as a determinant of foreign policy can also be a separate point. Okay, and technology I'll also be taking when I discuss with you US and China. I will then discuss, for example, technologies like, how many of you are aware of DeepSeek? What is DeepSeek? AI of which country? China. And US may you will see examples of Anthropic. Anthropic has Claude. Anthropic also has Mythos. Right now very much in the news. In fact, US government had used Claude even for the Venezuela attack. Okay, so technology as a disruptor, we'll be seeing that, but 9 points right now are enough. Other points, other disruptors we will have a look at as we move along. Okay, now write the heading. Basics of IR, international relations. Basics of international relations. Okay, first term Rico, foreign policy. We often use the term foreign policy. Put a dash and write the prime objective of any state's foreign policy, the prime objective of any state's foreign policy is the preservation of its national interest. The prime objective of any state's foreign policy is the preservation of its national interest. In this definition, there are two keywords I've used. I've used that keyword state. Another keyword I've used is national interest. Okay, I will be explaining now, both of you. Second term now, right? State. According to Montevideo Convention, a state comprises of 4 elements. According to Montevideo Convention, a state comprises of 4 elements. Any idea what are these elements? Population, good. Territory, very good. Then 2 are correct. What are the other 2? This is one of the, and I'll also show you, this question has been asked in prelims also. This question you also do in polity also. Please write the 4. Write population. First is population. Second is territory. Third is government. And fourth is sovereignty. Population, territory, government, sovereignty. One by one, let's understand. What is the meaning of population? The number of people, etc., who are present as a part of it. And please note, I am saying population, I am not saying citizens. Citizen is a subset of population, right? Because there will be some residents also. So first term is population. Okay. Now, second term is territory. Put a star mark on territory. This is a term that also differentiates. For example, I may have a population. I may even have a government. And we may claim that we are sovereign. But what if we don't have a territory? Would that be a state? It would not be a state. So, for example, you see demands for Kurdistan. Kurdistan are the Kurd people who are distributed across the regions of, let's say, Syria, Lebanon, other places. But they don't have a defined territory. In fact, they want to make a Kurdistan. Right? So when we see state, it also tells me another topic, that is nation. And state and nation are divided. They are not exactly the same. In some cases, they may overlap if the nation also has a territory. Right? So in state, before I move ahead, what are the four things I have seen? One is population, territory, government. Acha, one thing. Here, state is there and we see government. Okay? State and government. Any idea what is the difference between them? State hai and government. What about state government? Think of West Bengal. What is that? State government. Is that the same? Is that different? State, so you're saying state is total state. Then state government is? So see, sometimes this becomes a difficult concept. Okay, तो इसमें नीचे लिखो note करके. I'll tell you a couple of things that you should know. First लिखो. So state is the abstract entity. State is the abstract entity while the government is its physical form. State is the abstract entity while the government is the physical form. Okay, and please note, sometimes it is said you can criticize the government but you cannot criticize the state. Governments can come and go, governments can keep on changing. There's an election that happens, you have a government in power, you have government out of power. The governments can change. The government can be at the national level, the government can be at the state level, of course at the local level. We have, in our case, the 3-tier system, right? 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, you'll read about panchayats. Again, remember, state is different. State is the big abstract entity. And another thing, that is government. Okay? In state, there are 4 elements. What have we seen so far? Population, territory, government. Last is sovereignty. What is the meaning of sovereignty? Is India a sovereign country? Yes. How do you say so? You say, sir, it is written in the preamble. Can you say that? Is the word sovereign mentioned in the preamble? For that, you need to know there is a preamble also. Do we have a preamble? Right? Chalo. Those who are saying yes, please tell me what does the preamble say? What does the preamble say? How does it start? We the people of India. And after that, I know there will be silence. Aage, haan. We the people of India, yes. We are hearing. Then? Call me resolve. Then? There are 5 keywords. Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. सबसे पहला term क्या था? Sovereign. What is the meaning of sovereign? This term you should know. So लिखो in the note, second term लिखो sovereign. देखो, being independent in decision making, both internally and externally. Sovereignty is very important. Being independent in decision making, both internally and externally. Now you have to understand, see, sovereignty, right now you will think, sir, this is understood, I already know this. But if you go back to the medieval times, the dark ages, in the dark ages, there was a conflict between the church and the king. Who is superior? And there was always a conflict to the extent that the church was even more superior than the king. And if this was there, and this is also where Machiavelli, other people had a lot of fight. Hobbes as a thinker was there. You don't need to know the thinkers right now. These people fought for sovereignty, that ultimate sovereign should only be the king. The ultimate power should lie with the state. Why? Then you can execute the orders better. If there are 2 sovereigns, of course there can never be 2 sovereign. It defeats the meaning of sovereign. So sovereign is somebody who is the absolute, indivisible, permanent power. So what are we saying? In India sovereign, that India is sovereign. So in the internal matters also, in the external, everywhere, it is about independence in foreign policy making or in our own decisions. Nobody else, which is why, for example, right now USA said and Trump made a claim that we mediated India-Pakistan ceasefire. What did India say? Of course, India denied that, saying that this is our own internal matter and we are sovereign enough to decide for ourselves. We don't need your help, for example. Right? This is sovereignty. It is very important for countries' sovereignty. Now, you understand the meaning of sovereignty? Sovereignty also tells you that, for example, if Sri Lanka is in a crisis, can India directly invade Sri Lanka and saying we are going to help you? No. Why? Respect for sovereignty. Many times a country is in crisis, humanitarian crisis, other countries want to help it, but they cannot directly intervene because it will violate its sovereignty. Right? Now, when I'm saying sovereignty, when I discuss with you India, Pakistan, India, China, we will be discussing, for example, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, this corridor connects Gwadar, this is a port in Pakistan, to Kashgar in the Xinjiang province of China. The issue is that CPEC passes through Gilgit-Baltistan, the POK region. And then India says, it violates my territorial sovereignty and integrity. Which is why India does not give support to CPEC. And CPEC is a part of, we will see this later, BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Okay? So what does India say? If a project is violating India's sovereignty, India will not be a part of it. Countries cannot invade another country simply unless they are US. And when I'm saying unless they are US, unless they want to find imaginary weapons of mass destruction. Why do I say imaginary? US had said that they are going to intervene in other countries because they are weapons of mass destruction. Were they able to find those weapons? They were not able to find those weapons. Which also tells you the hypocrisy at the global level. The countries said you should respect sovereignty, but the great powers that are there, they violate the very order they establish. Fine? So, we were talking about state. What did I tell you about state? 4 elements. What are the 4 elements? Population, territory, government and sovereignty. Sovereignty is a very important aspect of it. Fine? Now, before I move ahead, yeah. No, you are saying if India is a member of a group, will it affect India's sovereignty? Right, right. Right. So, if India is following them, it does not take away our sovereignty. We are also committed to the global causes. What you are saying is also a debate. The debate is that joining an institution, does it reduce our sovereignty or does it impact it? For example, India is a member of Commonwealth. But being a member of Commonwealth does not violate our sovereignty. Similarly, most of the agreements that we are a part of, these agreements are having many times non-binding commitments. You are a part of it. Why? Why is India a part of climate? Because climate is a global common. Climate impacts everybody. For many things, you have to have a coordinated decision. It is not that you have been given a goal that you don't want to follow. We also want to follow that goal. Right? And we are working in a global structure for cooperation. Independently, you cannot solve climate. Independently, you cannot solve the problem of security. No one nation is big enough to solve the problem of terrorism. You need a coordinated action. For that, you join a group. But joining the group does not mean your sovereignty is diluted. And there is a very good point that you have made. Okay? No, not, see, dependence is 2 things, right? For example, India gives aid to countries. Aid can be in terms of a loan, aid can be in terms of a grant. Okay? Similarly, when India, for example, joins a grouping and India is getting support, India is also giving something in return. Okay? So, in that sense, when I'm saying decision making of India, for example, so that particular group, let's say whatever group you're thinking of, SCO, G20 BRICS, they cannot dictate how many soldiers will India have. What is our internal matters? How do we deal with Naxalism? How do we deal with terrorism? That India will dictate on its own terms. India can take support of it. Okay. Now, this was a question that was asked in your prelims. I'll give you 30 seconds to read this and then you will tell me what is the answer. Based on the discussion that we have had, you can easily answer this question. Have a look at it. People online also, I hope you're able to see the question. And you will see very close options. This question, many people will think is a question because state is also mentioned in which article of the Constitution? In case you've not done your polity yet, you will not be able to answer this. But when you see Article 12, for example, it talks about state. But just on Article 12, you will not be able to solve. This question is also a question on IR. And not only do I want to know the answer, I also want to know the reasons why other three are wrong. So I'll add somebody at the back. You want to try? B. Okay, we have done A and B. Only two options are remaining, C and D. Who will go with C? If we want to have a democratic setup, every option should get at least some weightage. Okay, people online are also divided. That is what I wanted. 50-50 हो रखा है A और B में. Very good. What about C? नहीं. D? नहीं. Okay. So just raise your hand, people at the back. How many of you go for B? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Many people. How many of you go for A? Equally divided. The class is almost divided. Fine. Now, I'll start with D and then let's see. A society permanently living in a definite territory, at least one keyword is there. Central authority will be the government. Executive responsible to the central authority. Independent judiciary. What is missing here? Why is D wrong? See, we don't see whatever correct answer is there, okay. I should also know why others are wrong. Why is D wrong? It is territory, it is government. Society can also think of population. What is not mentioned? Sovereignty. This becomes wrong. Number of persons who have been living in a definite territory. So territory is there, persons are there, population. Over a very long time, we don't care. Short time, long time. Culture, tradition, government. What is missing? Sovereignty is missing. Not the best definition. Now, a politically organized people of a definite territory. People is also there. Territory is also there. Authority to govern them. What does this mean? Government. Okay. 3 keywords I'm able to find. Now, let's look at very good keywords. Law and order. Okay. Natural rights. Okay. Safeguard the means of sustenance. Okay. Is this correct or incorrect? No sovereignty is there. But let's keep this for a moment because many of you said, so let's see. A community of person, territory. Just read this. Now, they are very smart. They did not mention the keyword sovereignty. But what is the meaning of it? Independent of external control and organized government. Out of these 4, see, many times what they will do, very close options. All the 3 are not incorrect entirely. They have some elements correct. Almost all the 3 have 3 things. What they don't have is sovereignty. Only option number A has this. Now, this question I will tell you would have been more difficult if option A was actually in D. So what if you read directly option A, you think, acha, this looks to be correct. Okay, I'll mark it correct. Now imagine if this was option number D. Many students would have seen this as A and would have marked it correct. This also tells you when you solve your MCQs, don't directly jump to the answer. Read the options once. And today we also understand something. This is known as elimination. I read the other options. Now I'm confident. And this will require some reasoning on your part. So we don't have to rush through it. This is an answer. The answer here is A. because it fulfills all the 4 conditions. And different definitions can be asked. I hope you are understanding what is being asked. Okay. So we were writing state. Okay. Write another definition on state. इसके नीचे लिखो state versus nation. State versus nation. And I've only told you. I'm just in the second part only now. State. Now, I'm saying state versus nation. Okay. It means both of them have some difference. So लिखो nation में लिखो nation comes from the word Nazi, not N-A-Z-I. Nation comes from the word Nazi, which means the feeling of oneness. Feeling of oneness. However, a nation does not have. No, I've written it is the feeling of oneness. Look, this can be because of. This can be because of shared history, shared history, comma, language, culture, shared history, comma, language, comma, culture, etc. देखो example. देखो the demand of Kurdistan by Kurds. The demand of Kurdistan Kurds. Kurds. ठीक है? अब देखो, when I look at Kurds, and these kind of questions have also been asked in the exam. They are present in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Okay? They are stateless ethnic group, which means they may not have any of the 4 entities. Okay? They are a people, they have a feeling of oneness, but they don't have a proper territory to live in. They don't have a proper government to rule themselves. This is one example. क्या हो गया example किसका? Kurdistan. Right? Sorry? You were saying? हाँ. Country नहीं है. There's a demand for it. They are making a demand to make their own state. So when I'm saying a nation may not be a state. There's a demand going on. The Baloch, for example, they want to be outside also. There's a demand growing. So they are connected. They have the same language. They have the same culture. So there's a demand for it. But simply having a demand does not mean you have a state. So nation and state are 2 different concepts. Okay. Now, just because of this, the term Kurds, the whole region becomes important. Now you look at it. Kurds inhabited areas. Okay, this is Syria, Iraq, Iran, Armenia, Turkey. Okay, and we will be seeing more maps as I move along, because see, IR you cannot do without understanding of maps. Okay, so this is one thing that we have seen. Okay, so I hope you're able to understand the difference between these 2 terms. Right? Are you able to understand? Now, state we have seen, nation we have seen, and the first term was foreign policy. Fine. Next, please again read the definition of foreign policy. What was foreign policy? Sorry? Pursuit of preservation of national interest, right? Now write the heading national interest. Third definition is national interest. Third definition is national interest. Because unless we know our definitions, we'll not be able to understand things well. Okay? Now, again, what does our definition say? The prime objective of any foreign policy, what is that? Preservation of national interest. That is the prime objective of a foreign policy. You have to preserve the national interest. But then you will say, sir, what is national interest? I don't know what is national interest. Okay? Any idea what is national interest? Is watching IPL national interest? Is watching IPL national interest? I'm asking you. You can agree, you can disagree. We're not looking at right answers right now. What is national interest for India, for example? Internal security, but not external security? Acha, okay. Only border management? Land borders or maritime? All, okay. Is that all? Which means interest is only about security? One aspect, okay. So, I'll be defining this also, okay. And for that, before we start, please write a line. This is a very prominent line. Nations have no permanent friends. Nations have no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Nations have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. This is the first quote you often hear in foreign policy. Second we will write is this: national interest is a set of states' vital goals, which is why I told you what is a state. What is the national interest? Many vital goals. Your friend spoke about security. Yes, even that is there. Survival, security, prosperity, and status. 4 major aspects. Right? So you have survival, security, prosperity, and status. And we will understand all these 4 very shortly. There are 4 keywords: survival, security, prosperity, status. And this, after we are done with this, then you will understand that even Indian foreign policy also tries to do all the 4. We want to have survival, you have to have security. Now, security is a multi-dimensional concept. Similarly, prosperity, which is why we have trade deals, which is why we want to have very good relations of trade with countries. When I say status, India's status in the leadership summits, India being very vocal about climate change, right? India, for example, taking leadership in certain summits. This year, India is the chair of BRICS, and you will see the BRICS summit very shortly. Okay. So, national interest is a set of states' vital goals. What are the 4 goals? Survival, security, prosperity, status. Now, let's come to these 4 goals. Survival is there. Okay. Now, if I look at India, for example, right? And I just need to know 4 major aspects, right? Survival is very important. The state must continue to exist. Now, for the survival, what can happen? For example, we had conflicts in between. Okay. Just after our partition, we had various challenges, including the issue of Kashmir, and internally also, if you think of Junagadh, Hyderabad, the whole unification, for example, that happened. So survival is a very important priority of any state, and survival is always a very important priority. The state should survive. So national interest has to be based on its survival, right? Second thing it goes into is security, and security, please think of as a very wide concept. Borders can be what? Land, it can be maritime, but right now in the recent times I also will include cyber also, space also. Now we have so many important satellites. What if these satellites are attacked, we will not be able to get the relevant data? So space security is also important, cyber security is also important. Okay, security of our citizens. The moment any issue happens, disaster is there. For example, think of Russia, Ukraine. Many doctors, many people were evacuated from these regions to India. In the current Iran-Israel conflict, many of our people were evacuated, yes or no? And you will see Operation Ganga, for example, Operation Kaveri, Sudan mein some issue happened, we evacuated our people. So what is that? Security is very important of our people, right? Stability is also there. For that, we ensure this, that we protect ourselves against cross-border terrorism. Okay, we have relevant border infrastructure. In prelims later on, you will see bodies like or groups like this. What is this? You'll say, bro, what is bro? Border Roads Organization. It is there for creating sensitive border infrastructure. Border Roads Organization. And right now we just need to know, if you only know these 4 keywords, that is good enough. We will be able to expand on them as we move ahead. Security is a relevant aspect of it. Third, like we discussed, prosperity. Prosperity means trade, growth, energy, remittances. All of that is there in prosperity. That is the economic dimension. Fine. Crude imports are rising. I want to diversify. I want to reduce dependence. That is also prosperity. Okay. India having the most remittances. This is also an aspect of prosperity. So when I look at prosperity, trade, energy, remittances, all of that is there. Right. And last is status. Now, many of you see sometimes India, people will say that in certain reports, for example, the global hunger index, we don't do well. Okay. So that means our status may not be as great. In certain reports, we do fairly well. So that tells you, and not just the reports, overall, how countries perceive. For example, India has never been a violent aggressor. India enjoys a lot of soft power. So you will get rank, respect, and voice in the world. And talking of voice, in the coming lectures, I will use the term India as the voice of Global South. Even that term has become very prominent. Fine. So in the status aspect, I will say India makes a claim to UNSC seat. This is also a mini topic we'll do when I do UN with you. That why should India be given a UNSC seat? We have a lot of credentials for that. World's largest democracy, peaceful nation, okay, the growth and development that is happening. We are one of the largest troop contributors in UN peacekeeping missions, etc., etc. Okay. For example, whenever we preside, 3 years back, India presided G20. Then the theme of that was Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Okay. Right now, 2026, we have the chair of BRICS. So a very expected question in 2027 and beyond will be India and BRICS presidency. One is the role of BRICS, but when India gets the presidency, what does it, how does it matter for India, and how does it matter for status of India, right? So 4 main dimensions when you look at national interest. Okay, we started with foreign policy. What is the definition of foreign policy? The prime objective of foreign policy is preservation of national interest. What is national interest? Just 4 keywords: survival, security, prosperity, status. Many times we think of national interest only either here or here, but we many times forget this, which is why India always tried to have a leadership role. Not just India, other countries also. Status is equally important. So we should move beyond survival and security also to prosperity and also to status. All the 4 are important. This is the first keyword of framework that you see, that is national interests. Okay. And you can also now end and write this quote, and just this quote: states are not moral actors. States are interest actors. Wherever their interest is, food security is here also, is here also. I'll explain to you. First, write this. States are not moral actors, states are interest actors. Okay. Now, your friend asked a very good question. He's asking, where do I put in food security? Right? That's a good question. Now, already if you see the framework that we have, see, when the concept security started, we started only about Earlier, the concept of security was based on only two aspects: borders and survival. United Nations Development Program and other entities. Okay, even you will look at a lot of feminist scholars. Feminist scholars will argue, if you look at borders and survival, okay, this is a very limited understanding of security. And what they will say, and even UNDP, they will say, please expand the definition. Which means security should not be limited to borders or survival. Security should mean human security. Now this becomes, the moment I say human security, abhi broad ho jata hai term apne aap. This also includes in it, so the modern definition of security is very broad. The conventional definition of security is this. Conventionally, security was what? Having more and more arms and ammunitions. But the modern definition says focus on human security, which means development of humans. So why limit it to food and environment? Why not? Right? Please draw this. And iske niche write a quote. This quote was asked in 2018. This will just help you understand that we now have a expanding definition, wider definition of human security. Health, education, environment, food, even that is a part of it. UNDP here means United Nations Development Program. So what I've said is this is the conventional definition. The modern definition is very wide. It includes various aspects. If you've written this, please write a quote. This quote was asked in a UPSC essay, and now you can also link international relations to this essay. Poverty anywhere is a threat to human security everywhere. The bracket you can write 2018. This is the UPSC essay of 2018. Poverty anywhere is a threat to human security everywhere. And whenever you have time, maybe not just after this class, even later on, the more you read your GS, the more points you can think on this topic. When I say poverty, think of, you'll say social issues, GS1. When I say everywhere, even globalization is linked to it. When I say human security, see, just a point of thought, I'll tell you. If you look at West Asia, and if you look at ISIS is a terrorist group, for example, the major recruitment they have, and if you look at the demography, they are the most poor and the most vulnerable sections. It means poverty anywhere can lead to even terrorism. Poverty anywhere can lead to other issues also. So this means poverty is now not a local phenomena. Which means if there is poverty in Africa, other nations should also be concerned. Because poverty will lead to extremism, terrorism, separatism. All of this can happen. Right? In internal security, when we do Naxalism, even there you will see one of the core reasons why Naxalism operated is because of lack of development and also poverty. Which is why when the government's response changed, That is there. So when I look at food security, now you have to understand the dimension of human security is very broad. Conventional security was linked only to borders, management of forces, fleets. Now you have to think of human security, not just land or border security. Is that clear? So if you now look at national interest, and which is why the bigger countries have more money, they have better technology, they will be able to implement their measures better. Smaller countries, not as much. Okay? So keep that in mind. This is something we have seen. Second term, right, or next term, don't follow this. I think for us, this is term number 4 or 5. Is it 4 or 5? First term was national interest. Sorry, first term was foreign policy. Second one was state. Then national interest. Okay, fourth is power. Fourth is power. And in power, you will see some terms very common in news. Have you heard about hard power? Right? Soft power? Right? Smart power? And don't think that hard and soft is based on touch. Right? Hard power is very symbolic of military power. Right? So here, you just write in power, you write the 4 types of power. Hard power is based on coercion. Coercion means use of force. Right? It can be military, it can be economic. This is your hard power. Right? So for example, 1971, liberation of Bangladesh. A proper war was there. Can be a reflection of hard power. India carried out surgical strikes. Okay. Think of 2016, think of 2019. Can be an example of hard power. And trade restrictions. Here you can give example. Coercion. Coercion, again, please remember, coercion is by force. Okay, for example, US is a big hard power. Why? Very strong military, very strong economy. So hard power is based on military and economic muscle. Based coercion is by force. And there are some examples where we see this operationalized. Of course, the most superior hard power here will be United States. So you have coercion, you have military power also, right? Both of these aspects. Second term that you want to know after hard power is soft power. And this term is equally important for us to know. Okay, there was somebody known as Joseph Nye who coined this term soft power. And instead of coercion, coercion में क्या है? Hard power. Soft power is based on attraction. Now the attraction can be in terms of culture, right? It can be values, it can be legitimacy. For example, people are very up to date with all the TV shows. Okay, so if you are conversing with a friend, you will say, okay, have you watched maybe any show, let's say Game of Thrones, any show? You can converse because the shows people are watching are common. People are using Netflix, most of the show are West in nature, and there whatever is being shown, right? Let's say what you eat, your cuisine, for example, global pizza, burgers, colas, etc., they have become a part of culture, right? People's dressing sense. So people will many times say, "Acha, this is a Western brand, this is Western clothing, this is something that is attractive." So attraction, soft power is even more prominent. Why? Because see, rule by coercion is limited. People may revolt. Soft power will have a long-term impact. More obedience can be generated from soft power because it is not coercive in nature. So here in India also, if you look at yoga, we celebrate International Yoga Day. When is it celebrated? June. Okay. So India now focuses a lot on its soft power, right? Diaspora. We say that Indian diaspora are our cultural ambassadors. You see people, you see videos of people celebrating, let's say Diwali, other festivals outside also. What is that? A projection of your culture only, right? Cinema, now this can be Hollywood, this can be Bollywood, right? You will see sometimes, let's say, many movies. For example, Dangal got maximum money from which country? China. Okay. A lot of Bollywood movies are very popular in Russia. Okay. So that also creates attraction. People get to know your culture, right? ISRO, for example, very recently or in general gets a lot of, let's say, attraction in general. And even democracy. What is democracy? It's a political system. But everywhere, people will say democracy is the best form of government. What is that? There is an attraction towards democracy. Even the erstwhile Soviet states, they adopted liberal democracies and capitalism. Why? There's so much of attraction towards it. So this is a very important dimension of power, soft power. And you will see in the recent times, India is projecting a lot of soft power. Soft power can be also because of people to people ties, right? You see student exchange programs. People go to Japan and Japanese students coming to India. Okay. And in general, also tourism is also a tool of soft power. So one of the best ways to improve relationship is to focus on soft power. That can be there. Now, hard power requires what? Proper strength. Now, I want to ask you, soft power without hard power, does it really mean anything? It is not, right? Merely having soft power and not having hard power, it means what? You will not be taken seriously in the world. For that, we use another term finally, smart power. Smart power mixes both. You are not just hard power. In fact, if you look at USA, USA is not just a hard power. USA is equally a soft power, right? So smart power is a mix of both, right? And one example here we can give, for example, India, in this case, vaccine Maitri, right? We had the capability to deliver this and we had the goodwill also, right? So soft power means you have to have both. For example, if India is the first responder in disaster, for example, a nation faces earthquake, a nation faces cyclone, India sends its relief and aid. It tells you two things. One, we have the capability, and the moment you give somebody aid, you also get goodwill. That helps. And India has consistently maintained its policy of having both showing capability as well as goodwill. Even this is there, right? And last thing is sharp power, a new term. And this term is generally used with China. Right? Now, what is sharp in this China? Main thing is you can have manipulation, influence operations, coercive lending. Has anybody here heard the term debt trap policies? China is infamous for its debt trap policies. What is the meaning of debt trap policies? Chinese infrastructure projects are marketed in such a way that you take the project, but then you get to know it's a huge debt trap. In fact, a major component of Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka and Pakistan debt is Chinese debt. These countries have taken the projects, but they have gone into a debt spiral. And problem with debt is what? Let's say there is a government in power. They have taken very unconventional decision. But the moment they lose elections, next government, they have to inherit the same policy. And if this is a very long debt trap, you cannot focus on your own development. You are only servicing the loan again and again. Right? So sharp diplomacy is basically you are using manipulation. One of the aspects can be debt trap. China also focuses a lot on something we know as psychological warfare. Playing with your mind. In the recent 1 month, how many of you have heard the news of China giving stapled visas to people from Arunachal? Nice stapled visas. And why are they doing that? They just want to show that people of Arunachal are our own people. That is why they're giving stapled visas. What is that? Playing with their mind. Creating nuisance. Now India will start to say, why are you doing that? This again creates a conflict. This is nothing but psychological warfare. You make outlandish claims on social media, other country will not say, no, this is not true. This is not something that is done. This has been a part of Chinese policy. Okay. So how many of you can explain to me psychological warfare? Can I have psychological warfare? Can I say UPSC is psychological warfare? Even before the exam, it creates so much of pressure on you. You almost anticipate why this exam is something else. Many people get MCQs wrong because they think the easiest answer, no, this cannot be right. If I'm thinking this is the answer, this is not right because the exam is so tough. What is that? Psychological warfare. More than the paper, the pressure of the paper is more heavier on you. Right? Any example of psychological warfare that you can think of? Hmm? Achha, but that is not directly psychological pressure because many people can actually be culprit in that. Huh? Very good point. Misinformation during wars. How many of you followed Operation Sindoor? Did you hear all of those claims? For example, the entire port of Pakistan has been taken, okay, or the Indian Navy has taken, and counter claims are being made from both the sides. Misinformation, propaganda as a tool of warfare. That is psychological warfare. Okay, write the term जो भी है psychological लिखो, उसमें you write down. Another reference I'll give you. Right, Sun Tzu's Art of War. This quote again is a UPSC essay topic. Today's class, I think 2 or 3 topics we have seen. Sun Tzu's Art of War. I'll first tell you what it says and then I'll make you write what he had said. He said that what is the best way to fight a war? What is the best way to win a war? You have to fight a war. To subdue the enemy before starting the war. Right? You create so much of psychological pressure on the enemy. They lose the war before starting it. This also happens in life. Sometimes we see the problem as so big. We are not able to give our efforts. And what happens? We lose the battle in our minds. And you will see, and Sun Tzu is a very prominent Chinese scholar, very well read. You can see, we know Kautilya's Arthashastra, the same comparable level Sun Tzu's Art of War has. This book is basically, again, about how the war should be fought, what should be there. Okay? So in this book, you will write a quote. I'll just tell you the exact part. But the broad reference is what I've told you, that the best way to fight a war is to subdue the enemy without fighting it. Okay? So write the quote. Because the supreme art of war, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy, is to subdue the enemy without fighting it. Subdue the enemy without fighting it. Can you think of any explanation to this quote? How can this quote be true? Take few seconds. And now see, the more you will read now the newspapers, your references, you will now get to see, this is also true. This can also happen. So again, I'm saying, if I say, how would you agree to this? How can you subdue the enemy without fighting a war? Forming an alliance, okay, that can be done. Just before a war, you have a big alliance. Good. Anything else? How can you subdue the enemy? Can you do a cyber attack? Yes. Without even doing a physical proper war, you do a cyber attack, let's say this can happen. Anything else? My question is, how can you subdue the enemy without fighting a war? One can be misinformation. Let's say a random claim that we have taken X part of the territory of a country. अब वो बोलेगा भाई nothing of this has happened and this and that. Or you make outlandish claims. You have 10,000 people in your army. You say we have 10 lakh people who are going or fighting a war. All of this can happen. Correct. So weapon testing, all of that will create a psychological pressure, right? They could have done it privately, but let's say if something is done in the public, it is done to create a fear. That can be done. Anything else? China, and you'll see the diplomats of China being very aggressive on Twitter. Have you seen that? When they are very aggressive, for that also there's a term that is used. Write this term also somewhere. Wolf warrior diplomacy. Okay? Very assertive, confrontational style of policy used by Chinese diplomats. So they will make very aggressive claims. This is also a type of what? Questioning psychological warfare. Okay? In this now, I'll give you one last homework. Please write it and read about it. Very interesting and one of the biggest example which you can give in this topic. You'll write this. World's first digital weapon, Stuxnet. Okay? 2010. And this was by Israel and US. And this compromised the nuclear centrifuges in Iran. Without invading, without fighting, what have they done? They've subdued it. And with these computer weapons, we have something known as, you can deny. You will say, we have not done the attack. You figure out who has done it. So this is a very important example, Stuxnet. Okay. Natan's facility is the area. We will see this later on. But Stuxnet is a very good example. You can use this example in GS3 also. Cyber attack by some other country on some other country. And this is largely the world's first digital weapon. This can also be used in this. Okay. So you can use it. Iske saath please write one more keyword. And from the very first class, please try to make a list of keywords. The keyword is plausible deniability. Right? For example, whenever there's a cyber attack that happens, we can say we have not done the attack. There is an element of plausible deniability. Right? There is a lack of clear proof. And there are multiple theories. So this also happens. Plausible deniability. Which makes these wars also equally important. Or at least this makes it more dangerous, I should say. Right? So I think today we've seen topics like poverty anywhere is a threat to human security everywhere. Right now, this one. What is the quote of Sun Tzu that you wrote? Ultimately, subdue the enemy without fighting the war. And you have examples like Stuxnet, which you will read more upon, and you should find more. So you will have a list of examples with you ready. So we were talking about the four faces of power. Okay. Now, is IPL soft power? My question. Is IPL soft power? Yes. You've seen big heads of state watching the finals of IPL. It generates so much of revenue. Things are discussed, right? So from an economic sense, status sense, IPL, like Bollywood, like yoga, also generates soft power. Right? Very recently you saw even USA is now, team of USA is participating in T20. So more countries can also be there. So sports, if I say, is football a symbol of soft power? Same sense, another sport can also be a symbol. It depends on how well it is marketed, how well it is used. Okay? So even this can be there. Right? Bollywood films, again soft power, we can agree on that. Okay. Now, I think, have you written all these lines? Hard power coerces through military, this definition you've written. Soft power co-opts through attraction. एक बार इस बस ये line लिख लो अलग से. Write this separately. Already you've written it, but this you read, right? Indian soft power assets, this we've already written. ISRO development partnerships. Okay. Smart power already we had seen, it's a calibrated mix of both. So hard power coerces, the keyword here is coercion, and in soft power the keyword is attraction. So culture, values, legitimacy, even that part is there. Okay. Second and third point you've already seen, that Indian soft power, it can be diaspora, it can be democracy, yoga, cinema, ISRO, all of this ultimately generates goodwill for India. Okay. So that is something we have had a look at. Now, we started with definition of foreign policy. We went to state, we went to nation state difference we saw. Then we went into what is national interest. Now tell me, what are the 4 elements of national interest? Survival, security, partnership, status. So your revision should be, survival, security, prosperity, status. So when you're revising your classes, then you should be in a span. Okay, I know this keyword, this keyword, this keyword, this example. Okay. Next, right, balance of power. Now you will understand the first part even better. I told you geopolitics that is operating. Fine. Now, when I'm saying balance of power, I hope you understand. See, what is balance? Think of a seesaw. This is a balanced seesaw. This is an imbalanced seesaw. Somebody is rising, somebody is falling. What is the meaning of balance of power? Okay. Just write this definition. States combine to prevent any single power from dominating the system. Balance of power is states that are combining to prevent any single power from dominating the system. Okay, now balance of power, I will first give you examples. Okay, let's see this in Asia right now. China is rising, everybody is aware of it. Yes, China is rising economically, militarily it is increasing. On land, we see border disputes with China, and on sea, you have South China Sea. In South China Sea, we have something known as, write this as your homework, but I will also cover with you, right? 9-line. 9-line is Chinese claim that many islands in the South China Sea are its own islands. SCS is South China Sea. Okay. Now, the moment China rises, you will see its other impacts. Neighbors respond. For example, India and US are converging because of China. China can be a, let's say, both of them want to counter China. US wants to counter China. India also wants to counter. So US and India are coming together. Why? Because China is rising. What is that? They are balancing the power. There is something known as Quad. What is Quad? Will have 4 things. So Quad basically is a grouping of India, US, Japan, Australia, and this group is related to Indo-Pacific. Quad is again a separate topic we'll have a look at, but the point I'm trying to make is China is rising, US and India are converging to balance it. There's a rise of Quad. Quad is comprising of 4: India, US, Japan, Australia, which talks about free, open, prosperous Indo-Pacific. Right? Indo-Pacific may one of the big challenges China. China claims a lot of islands to be its own islands. Right? When international body, they said that China's claim is bad, China did not adhere to the verdict. China said this verdict is wrong. What is that? So this is known as what? We know a term, for example, US hegemony. Have you heard this term, hegemony? What is hegemony? Have you heard this term? Tell me. Or you have, what is the meaning of hegemony? Hegemony simply means dominance. Okay? The Hindi term for that can be even dadagiri. Right? So what is hegemony, for example? It is overall assertion of dominance that is there, right? The US claimed to be the word hegemon. Right now, US is in slight decline. US taking a step back. Now we'll be seeing this, of course, in other classes that we have. So what happens? China rises, neighbors, they respond, and the whole system rebalances. Again, remember, there is no friendship here. It is ultimately national interest. I hope that we are clear on. So if China is increasing, it is not just China. Other countries are responding to it. Similarly, if North Korea does a nuclear weapons testing, every other country, major country, they will want to rebalance. They want to converge and conserve their interests. As simple as that. So the idea of balance of power is what? That the rise of one nation is countered by one more nation. Okay? The states are combining to prevent any single power from dominating the system. Right? And this, as we do other topics, we will see this in operation. Right now, the major conflict is between US and China. Some countries are close to China. For example, we saw sanctions have been put on Russia. But who is helping Russia? China, North Korea. Right? West countries are against Russia, but China is helping it economically. So this is there. So there is a fight between different groups that is going on. So that tells you about the balance of power, right? Now, what happens here? Again, simple. Let's say there's a country A. It is building its defenses, right? Let's say China is testing its weapons. Country B, it is reading the threat. Country B is doing the same, another response to it, okay? Up now, because of country B, A will feel less safe. And A and B will be spiraled into a conflict, right? This is also known as security dilemma. What is security dilemma? You are working on your security. For example, just think of, there are two neighbors. One neighbor builds a big wall and has a lot of CCTV cameras. The other person will see, acha, every part of my house will now be, let's say, monitored. They will not have even bigger walls. They will also fortify almost everything. So in international relations, if you think, for example, Russia has brought 10 missiles. Maybe for its own defense, but US will feel these missiles can be misused against me. Now US will bring 12 more missiles. Now Russia will think, array, they have more missiles, we have to make it more. This ultimately leads to what? Arms race. And this is also a dichotomy of IR. Every country says we will have peace. We want peace. But for peace, everybody say nuclear weapons are important. We have to have nuclear weapons so that you can have peace. And by having the weapons, the chance is also of their misuse. Okay? So this spiral is there, right? Spiral repeats again and again. So security dilemma leads to insecurity. And that leads to arms race. Again, think of India. We are surrounded by nuclear armed neighbors. Who are they? China and Pakistan. We also have a huge maritime boundary. So we have many threats from maritime also. In tomorrow's class, that is, we'll focus on India's geography. That how Indian geography influences Indian foreign policy. So we will be extending these concepts tomorrow also. Right? So here you have to understand security dilemma leads to insecurity. And finally, that leads to arms race. And arms race creates what? It creates a challenge. Is that clear? Okay. So here, just remember the term security dilemma. These are very basic concepts. When you read your newspaper, editorials and articles, you will find these terms. So you should know. Today's in the first class, I'm focusing only on the basics. So that these terms make sense to you. Okay. So I hope this part you're able to understand what is security dilemma. Okay. Okay. This part, that why India Science Partnership, I'll be telling you in tomorrow's class. But before that, I want you to write the last term, strategic autonomy. How many of you remember that I use this term, autonomy, strategic autonomy? Okay, here we will just write this term because tomorrow's class will start with NAM, okay, non-alignment movement. That is something you need to know. So I just need to tell you this, and alliances and all of that part I'll tell you. Now, again, please tell me, what is the meaning of autonomy? Autonomy, ability to do something, that is your autonomy, right? What is the meaning of strategic? In today's class, please remember two more terms. Tactical means something done in the short term. Strategic, please remember, will be long term, and it will be security oriented. Long term and security oriented, right? So when I'm saying strategic autonomy, the meaning of strategic autonomy, what is autonomy? Being able to decide for yourself. And India has always maintained strategic autonomy as a main feature of Indian foreign policy, right? India was one of the founding members of NAM. What is NAM? Non-alignment movement, which we'll discuss tomorrow. And NAM basic idea was strategic autonomy. We did not want to take sides. We did not want to be in the US camp or in the USSR camp. Why? Being in one camp will reduce our options. The best way to understand it is, in the current world order, is India having good relations with US? Yes. And yet is India able to buy the cheap Russian oil? Yes. Although another example you can say, sir, because of cheap Russian oil, US is putting tariffs on India. That is separate. But India is able to do both. India is able to have relations with Ukraine also and Russia. India is able to have relations with Palestine, with Iran, with Israel and the West countries. Right? What is that? Strategic autonomy, that we are able to have issue-based cooperation. And we are not constrained by our choices. What is the meaning of this? Strategic autonomy, right? So just write this one line, and this we'll do it in the next class. You go strategic autonomy and just write it in one line, summarize karo. Because strategic autonomy is a country's ability. Strategic autonomy is a country's ability to pursue its own foreign policy. To pursue its own foreign policy, comma, defense. Own foreign policy, defense, and economic choices without depending heavily on or being controlled by other nations, or being controlled by other nations. The basic idea is to have an independent foreign policy. Fine. And today you will end this class by just this quote. And next class we'll continue with the remaining topics. India is entitled to make its own choices. Dr. S. Jaishankar. India is entitled to make its own choices. India is entitled to make its own choices. Fine. Now, when we do NAM, and we'll go in more details, fine, so we'll have a look at it. Today's class, of course, being the first class, so I've just given you an overview of topics. Okay, now, what you are going to do is, one is go through the homework, try to make a short note of this, and please remember, by the end of our classes, homeworks के भी अलग से notes बन जाएंगे आपके, right? So homework is something I give you. Second, if you have time, the essay topics that I've given you, just try to just brainstorm 5 minutes, 10 minutes, okay? Because I think some essay topics in quotes are also there in the first class. Fine. Go through this. If there is any topic you are finding difficulty in understanding, put a star mark. Because IR is a subject, what I've told you in one class, maybe very briefly, will be a particular topic in the upcoming classes that you will have. Fine. So that is there, right? So any topic, any keyword you're not able to understand, put a star mark. We will again meet. I'll first take up your doubts if that be the case, and then we'll continue forward. Tomorrow when we start, my major focus is to understand NAM, strategic autonomy, right? Pillars of Indian foreign policy and multi-alignment. 4 topics that we'll do tomorrow. Yeah. And the timing for your IR classes will be in the morning. So we'll be meeting 9:30. Okay. Roughly, keep in mind, roughly 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours classes will be there, right? So that is the format upcoming. Okay. The couple of initial classes, people who are watching this online will be streamed on YouTube so that you get to know how the classes happen, what is our coverage, right? How do we teach and address our topics? And later, of course, these classes are a part of the particular groups, or sorry, the particular program. If you're more interested to know that, you can join it. At least the coming 2 more classes will be on YouTube at least. Okay. Now, people who are watching, who are there offline, if you have any doubt, you can stay back. I'll answer your doubts. Other people who are clear, we will meet tomorrow. Okay.